It is late afternoon on the shore of the Sea of Galilee, and the crowd has grown too large. People keep coming, down from the hills, in from the fishing villages, along the dusty road that hugs the water. They press so close to the man at the center that he can no longer stand on the sand without being crushed. So he does something strange. He steps into a fishing boat, asks the men to push it out a few feet from the shore, and sits down. Now, the water carries his voice back to them. Now, the whole hillside becomes his audience. And then, this teacher from Nazareth, who could say anything, who has just healed the sick and silenced the proud, opens his mouth to teach the most important truths a human being will ever hear. And what does he say? He tells them about a farmer. A farmer went out to scatter seed. Some fell on the path. Some fell on rocky ground. Some fell among thorns. And some fell on good soil. That is the story. That is the whole thing. The crowd listens. Some of them nod. And then, when he finishes, most of them get up and walk home no wiser than when they came. Here's what most people miss. That was the point. Because something happens after the crowd leaves. The 12 men closest to him, the ones who walk with him every day, who eat at his table and sleep beside his fire, pull him aside. And they ask him a question that should stop you cold. They ask him why he talks like this. Why riddles? Why stories? Why not just say what he means? Even they didn't understand it. Hold on to that. The men who knew him best could not crack the very first story he told. We will come back to that story and to the strange thing he said next, because it is the key that unlocks every other parable in this video. But not yet. This is not a story about farming. This is not a story about seeds. This is not a quaint children's lesson with a tidy morale. This is about a deliberate method, a way of speaking that the Greeks called parabole, which means to throw one thing down beside another. Jesus was not simplifying the truth for the slow. He was doing something far more unsettling. He was sorting his listeners. The curious would shrug and leave. The hungry would lean in and ask. And the same words that close one heart would open another. Stay with me. Because once you see how the sorting works, you will never read these stories the same way again. So let's look at that first story again. The one even the disciples couldn't crack. A farmer walks across his field with a bag of seed at his hip, flinging it by the handful. And here is a detail you would miss unless someone told you. In the first century Middle East, farmers scattered the seed first and plowed it under afterward. So the sower is not careless when he flings grain onto the path and the rocks. He is doing exactly what farmers did. The seed lands everywhere. What changes everything is not the seed. It is the ground. Some seed falls on the hard path, and birds snatch it before it can sink in. Some falls on thin soil over rock, springs up fast, then withers the moment the sun gets hot because it has no root. Some falls among thorns that choke it as it grows. And some falls on good soil and produces a harvest 30, 60, 100 times what was planted. 4 soils, 4 hearts. And when Jesus finally explains it in private, he tells the disciples the seed is the word of God and the soil is you. The hard path is the heart too, packed down to receive anything. The rocky ground is the person who says yes with joy, then quits the moment faith costs them something. The thorns are the worries and the wanting that slowly strangle a good beginning. And the good soil is the heart that hears, holds on, and bears fruit. Now ask yourself the uncomfortable question. Which one are you? Because the unsettling part of this parable is that all 4 hear the exact same word. The difference was never the message. The difference was the ground it landed on. Hold that thought, because it comes back at the end of this video in a way you will not expect. But it gets stranger. In another moment, Jesus tells a story about a man who did everything right by the world's measure. A rich farmer has a year so good the barns can't hold it. His fields overflow. And he stands there, congratulating himself and says, I will tear down my barns and build bigger ones and store up all my grain. And then I will say to my soul, take it easy, eat, drink, be merry. You can almost admire him. He worked, he won, he planned for the future. And God says one word to him. In Greek, it is aphron. We translate it fool, but the word means something sharper. It means a person with no mind, no sense, someone who has missed the entire point of being alive. You fool, God says. This very night, your life will be demanded from you. Then, who will get what you have prepared for yourself? He had a plan for the grain. He had no plan for his soul. He spent his one life building a wall around his stuff, and death walked straight through it. And here is the grief buried in this story. Nobody in the parable is evil. The man is not a thief. He is not a cheat. He is not cruel. He is just a person who treated his own life as the thing he owned, when all along it was the thing he had been lent. That is how quietly a life can be wasted. Not in scandal, in bookkeeping. Pay attention to this, because now the pattern starts to show itself. In both stories, the surprise lands at the very end, and it flips what you assumed. You thought the farmer with the big harvest was the success. He was the warning. And then Jesus tells a story that should have gotten him thrown out of every synagogue in Galilee. A lawyer asks him a simple question: who is my neighbor? And instead of answering, Jesus tells a story. A man is traveling the road from Jerusalem down to Jericho. A real road, 17 miles of switchbacks through bandit country. A road so dangerous it had a nickname, the Way of Blood. Robbers strip him, beat him, and leave him half dead in a ditch. Then a priest comes down the road, a holy man. He sees the body and he crosses to the other side. Then a Levite, a temple assistant, another religious man. He sees the body and he too crosses over. And the people listening would have nodded because they knew where this was going. The next man down the road would be an ordinary Jewish layman, the hero, the everyman who does what the proud religious leaders fail to do. Except that is not who comes next. The next man down the road is a Samaritan. You have to understand what that word did to a first century Jewish crowd. The historian Josephus records that the hatred between Jews and Samaritans was so violent that Samaritans had once snuck into the Jerusalem temple during Passover and scattered human bones across the floor to defile it. These were not rivals. They were enemies with centuries of blood between them. To a person in that crowd, Good Samaritan was not a heartwarming phrase. It was a contradiction. It was almost an insult. And it is the Samaritan who stops. The Greek says he was moved with splanchnisomai, moved in the gut, in the bowels, a compassion so physical it hurts. He kneels in the dust beside his enemy. He pours out his own oil and wine on the wounds. He lifts a stranger onto his own animal, walks beside him to an inn, and pays the bill out of his own pocket, promising to cover whatever more it costs. Then Jesus turns to the lawyer and asks, which of these three was the neighbor? And the lawyer cannot even say the word Samaritan. He just mutters, the one who showed mercy. And Jesus says, go and do likewise. He took the most hated man his audience could imagine and made him the only one who understood God. That is what these stories do. Every single time, they reach into your certainty about who is in and who is out, who is righteous and who is lost, and they turn it upside down right when you are sure you know the ending. Before we go further, stop for 1 second and notice what just happened across those three stories. A farmer scattering seed, a rich man counting grain, a traveler bleeding in a ditch. Three completely different scenes, and the exact same move underneath all of them. Each one hands you a comfortable assumption, lets you settle into it, and then knocks it out from under you at the last possible moment. That is not an accident. That is the engine. If you are seeing that pattern for the first time right now, that is exactly why this channel exists. To take the stories you thought you already knew and show you the part hiding in plain sight. So, if this is opening something up for you, subscribe and stay with us, because the next 3 parables push this further than you would believe. And somewhere in the comments, tell me this. When you heard the Good Samaritan, who did you picture as the Samaritan in your own life? I read those. Now, back to the stories, because the next one is about a door, and the door closes. There is a wedding coming, and 10 young women are waiting for it. In a first century Jewish village, a wedding did not start at a fixed hour. The groom came for his bride when the arrangements were finished, and that could be evening or midnight or the small hours before dawn. So the bridesmaids waited with lamps, ready to light his way the moment the shout went up. 10 of them wait through the long evening. 5 of them brought extra oil. 5 did not. And the groom is delayed. The hours stretch. Heads nod. All 10 fall asleep. And notice, Jesus does not blame them for sleeping. That is not the failure. The failure shows up at midnight when the cry rings out. The groom is here. Come out to meet him. All 10 wake. All 10 reach for their lamps. And 5 of them watch their flames sputter and die because they have nothing left to burn. They turn to the others. Give us some of your oil. But the wise ones cannot. There isn't enough to share. And if they pour it out, no one's lamp lasts. So the 5 run off into the dark to buy more. And while they are gone, the groom arrives. The wedding party goes inside, and the door closes. When the 5 come back, breathless, knocking, calling out, a voice answers from inside. I do not know you. That is the whole story. And it should make you uncomfortable, because these were not bad women. They wanted to be there. They showed up. They had lamps. They were sincere. They were just not ready, and readiness was the one thing that could not be borrowed at the last minute. Here's the part nobody tells you. Every one of these parables is about the same crisis, scaled up. The soils were about whether the word takes root in you. The rich fool was about whether your life was ever really yours. And now, the closed door is about whether you are ready when the thing you cannot schedule finally arrives. Watch the stakes climb. Personal, then mortal, now eternal. And this is where we have to answer the question the disciples asked at the very beginning. Why? Why teach like this at all? If these truths matter this much, why wrap them in riddles instead of saying them plainly? The answer Jesus gives is one of the hardest things in the Gospels. When the disciples ask him, he says, the knowledge of the secrets of the kingdom has been given to them, but to others he speaks in parables, so that. And here he quotes the prophet Isaiah. Though seeing, they may not see, and though hearing, they may not understand. Read quickly, that sounds cruel, like he is hiding the truth on purpose to keep people out. But look closer. He is describing something you have watched happen your whole life. The same sermon falls on a full church, and one person weeps while the person next to them checks the time. The same words, different ground. A parable does not force its way in. It waits at the door of a heart and knocks, and only the one who wants to know badly enough will get up, cross the room, and open it. The story protects the truth from the merely curious and reserves it for the genuinely hungry. Jesus was not locking people out. He was making sure the door could only be opened from the inside. And that means every one of these stories has been doing something to you while you listened, quietly sorting. The seed has already landed. The only question left is the ground. So hold all of it in your mind now. The 4 soils, the foolish man counting his grain, the enemy kneeling in the ditch, the closed door at midnight, because there is one more story, and it is the one Jesus saved his whole heart for. A father has 2 sons, and the younger one comes to him with a request so cold it would have stopped the room. Give me my share of the estate. Now, you have to hear what that meant. An inheritance came when a father died. To ask for it while the father was still breathing was to say, out loud, in front of everyone, I wish you were dead. You are worth more to me as a corpse than as a father. In that village, in that culture, the father would have been within his rights to strike the boy, to disown him, to summon the elders and have him publicly shamed. He does none of it. He divides the estate. He lets the boy go. And the son takes the money and runs to a far country and burns through all of it. Every coin on everything until a famine hits and the cash is gone and the only work left is feeding pigs. A Jewish boy feeding pigs, standing in the mud so hungry he eyes the slop in the trough and wishes he could eat it. This is a young man who has hit the exact bottom of a human life. And there, in the pig pen, the story says he came to himself. He rehearses a speech. Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me a hired hand. And he turns toward home with nothing, expecting nothing. Now here is the line that breaks people. While he was still a long way off, his father saw him, still a long way off, which means the father was looking, day after day, scanning the road, the same road that swallowed his boy, waiting for a shape on the horizon that might be him. And the moment he sees that shape, this dignified Middle Eastern man, this head of a household who has never run for anything in his life, pulls up his robe, bares his legs like a child or slave, and runs down the road in front of the whole village. The Greek says he was moved with splenchnisomai, that same gut-deep compassion we saw in the Samaritan, and he throws his arms around a son who still smells like pigs and kisses him before the boy can even finish his rehearsed apology. Stop and stand at that gate with him for a moment, because you have stood there. Maybe you have been the one watching a road, leaving a porch light on for someone who stopped calling, checking your phone at 2 a.m. for a name that never lights up the screen. Or maybe you have been the one walking home, rehearsing the speech, certain that the best you can hope for is to be taken back as a servant. This parable knows both of those aches, and it tells you that the father was not at the gate to deliver a verdict. He was at the gate to watch for you. And now the threads pull together. Remember the very first parable, the 4 soils, the one even the disciples could not understand. The one I promised was the key to all the others. Here is the key. The whole secret of the soils was never about being good enough ground. It was about whether the heart, once broken open, would finally receive what it was given. The hard path, the rocky shallow, the thorns, and then a boy in a pig pen, scraped down to nothing, every defense stripped away, soil broken so completely that when the smallest seed of "I will go home to my father" lands in it, it takes root and produces a harvest no one saw coming. The prodigal is the good soil, not because he was better, because he was finally broken enough to receive. That is what every parable in this video has been circling. The priest and the Levite were hard ground. The Samaritan was good soil. The rich fool was choked by thorns. The 5 foolish women had shallow roots that ran dry at midnight. And the son who wished his father dead became, in the end, the field that bore the greatest harvest, not by earning his way back, but by coming home empty and letting himself be received. There is still an older brother in this story, standing in the field, refusing to come into the party, furious that grace was wasted on someone who did not deserve it. And Jesus leaves that ending open. He never tells us whether the older brother goes in, because that question was never about the older brother. It was about everyone in the crowd who thought they had earned their place at the table. It is the same sorting one more time. The door is open. The music is playing. The only thing left to decide is whether you will walk in. So what do you carry home from all of this? 3 things. First, the parables were never riddles meant to keep you out. They were doors. Jesus wrapped the deepest truths of the kingdom in stories about farmers and travelers and runaway sons for one reason, so that the truth would wait quietly for anyone hungry enough to come and open it. The curious heard a nice tale and went home. The hungry heard their own life and stayed. The story was never the obstacle. It was the invitation. Second, every one of these stories was holding up a mirror, and you were always in the reflection. You are one of the four soils. You are somewhere on the road to Jericho, passing by or kneeling down. You are either carrying extra oil or hoping the hour never comes. These were never stories about people who lived 2,000 years ago. They were stories about the person listening right now, about you. And third, this is the one I want you to take to bed tonight. In every parable Jesus told, the surprise was always mercy. The enemy is the one who stops. The fool is the one who looks successful. And the Father is not waiting at the gate with a list of your failures. He is watching the road. He has been watching the whole time you were gone. And the moment you turn toward home, he does not wait for your apology. He runs. He is still running. He has always been running toward the ones who thought they had gone too far to come back. So let me ask you before you go, of all the parables in this video, the soils, the rich fool, the Samaritan, the closed door, the running father, which one landed on you the hardest? Which one felt less like a story and more like a mirror? Tell me in the comments. I read them, and I think the answer says more about where you are standing right now than you might expect. The seed has been scattered. It has landed on the ground that is you. What grows next was always the only part of the story you got to write.